The unexpected discovery. The vastness of space had always been a mystery, but today something unusual was happening. A signal, faint but persistent, was being picked up by the Earth's largest space observatory. The signal wasn't random, nor was it from any known satellite or spacecraft. It had a pattern, too structured to be natural. The scientists at the observatory were immediately alerted. It was something they had never encountered before. The signal was coming from deep space, a region that had remained unexplored for centuries. The location was far from any human settlements, and its distance made it almost impossible to reach. But the signal persisted. It grew stronger with every passing hour, as if it were calling for attention. The frequency was like a beacon, pulling at the curiosity of every scientist, every military expert, and every space agency around the globe. Commander Laura Hughes of the Earth Exploration Fleet was the first to receive the briefing. She stood at the front of the command center, eyes glued to the massive screen that displayed the mysterious signal's trajectory. She could feel the tension in the room as the whole team watched the data come in. They had no idea who or what was sending this signal, but one thing was clear. It wasn't of earthly origin. "We have to investigate," Commander Hughes said, breaking the silence. "Prepare the ship, we're leaving in 2 hours." Her voice was calm, but her mind raced. There were many unknowns, and unknowns in space often meant danger. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. If this was an alien message, they needed to know what it meant. If it was a trap, they had to be ready. The crew of the Odyssey, a state-of-the-art exploration ship, was on standby. It wasn't a military vessel, but it was equipped with the best technology for deep space exploration. The ship had been designed for such missions: unmanned probes, deep space scans, and long-range communication. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't a routine mission. This was a mystery that could change everything. As the Odyssey prepared for launch, the ship's captain, Lieutenant Marcus Reyes, went over the data once more. The signal had been traced to an area of space they had never explored before, deep within the uncharted sectors. But the strangest part of all was that the signal's source was not stationary. It was moving, at a steady pace. Who would send a signal in the middle of nowhere and keep it moving? Lieutenant Reyes muttered to himself. The Odyssey blasted off from Earth's atmosphere, leaving the planet behind. The crew was calm, focused, but there was a sense of unease. Everyone knew the risks of deep space travel. There were plenty of unknowns out there, things they couldn't even begin to imagine. But there was something about this mission that felt different. It wasn't just curiosity. It was like they were being drawn in by some unseen force. Hours passed, and the crew of the Odyssey moved deeper into space. The signal grew stronger with every passing minute. It was almost as if it were following them. The ship's sensors began to pick up strange readings, unusual fluctuations in space-time that shouldn't have been there. But as they pushed forward, something even stranger happened. "Captain, you might want to take a look at this," one of the crew members said nervously. Reyes walked over to the sensor console. A large object appeared on the radar, a massive shape, unlike anything they had seen before. It wasn't a comet, asteroid, or any natural formation. It was a ship, a warship. But it was drifting in the void, untouched by time, as if it had been there for centuries. The crew stared in silence, eyes wide with disbelief. The warship was colossal, covered in intricate designs, yet completely still. No lights, no movement, no signs of life. It had been abandoned, but why? And who had built it? "Prepare to dock," Commander Hughes ordered. "Let's find out what this is." As the Odyssey drew closer, the warship's dark form loomed ever larger, casting a shadow across the cold depths of space. The crew's excitement was tempered by a growing sense of dread. They were about to uncover something that had been hidden for a very long time. The unknown had become real. The origins of the warship. The Odyssey drifted silently through the cold vacuum of space, its crew aboard in tense anticipation. Commander Laura Hughes stood at the bridge, her eyes focused on the massive warship looming ahead, now clearly visible through the viewing windows. It seemed to defy all logic. How could something so massive, so ancient, exist in this remote part of space, completely untouched by time, and more importantly, who could have built it? How long has this thing been here? Lieutenant Reyes asked, his voice tinged with disbelief as he scanned the warship on the ship's radar. Far too long, Hughes replied, her mind racing. But there's something strange about it. It's as if this ship was waiting for someone to find it. They were now close enough to see intricate engravings on the surface of the warship, symbols that were unfamiliar to any human language known. Alien, yes. But there was something else. There was a pattern, an order to the markings, like a forgotten code begging to be deciphered. It was beautiful, eerie, and unsettling all at once. "Captain," one of the officers spoke up, "we've detected an unusual energy signature coming from the heart of the ship. It's faint, but it's there. It almost feels like the ship is alive." "Alive?" Reyes repeated, his eyes narrowing. He felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, alive?" The officer didn't have an answer, but the unease was palpable. Something about this warship wasn't just mysterious. It was sentient in some way. The crew could feel it. Hughes moved to the communications console and signaled for a closer scan. As the Odyssey approached the warship's docking bay, a flood of data filled the bridge's screens. But none of it made any sense. The ship's architecture was like nothing they had ever seen. It was not just advanced, it was otherworldly. "It's made of a material we don't recognize," Reyes noted, reading the data aloud. "It's a composite, but with properties that suggest it has been designed to withstand almost anything, and the energy readings are unlike anything we've encountered. It's as if it's been charging itself over time." "Charging?" Hughes questioned, her brow furrowing. "Why would it need to charge? For what?" As the Odyssey docked with the warship's exterior, a sudden jolt ran through the ship. A low hum vibrated from the walls, and the lights flickered momentarily. It was as though the warship had just awakened, reacting to their presence. "Did you feel that?" one of the crew members asked, a hint of panic in his voice. "I felt it," Hughes said, her voice steady. "It's reacting to us. This ship is more than just a derelict vessel. It's waiting for something." The air on the bridge grew thick with uncertainty. No one knew what they were about to uncover. Could this warship be a relic of an ancient human civilization? Or was it something far more sinister, something created by a force beyond their comprehension? "We're going in," Hughes said, her tone resolute. "Prepare yourselves. We'll board the ship and find out what this is all about." As the crew readied themselves, the warship's immense docking bay doors slowly creaked open, revealing a dark and silent interior. They couldn't see anything inside at first, just shadows and the promise of secrets hidden in the darkness. Stepping out of the Odyssey and into the unknown, the crew felt the weight of the moment. They were about to step onto a ship that had been abandoned, yet somehow still felt alive. The deeper they ventured into the ship's belly, the more oppressive the silence became. It was as if the ship had been waiting for this moment, for these strangers to come and unlock its secrets. In the distance, barely visible, the crew noticed a faint light coming from deeper within the warship's corridors. It was soft, pulsating, almost rhythmic. The heart of the ship, perhaps? A beacon? Or something else entirely? "I have a bad feeling about this," Lieutenant Reyes whispered, but it was too late to turn back. The crew moved forward, guided by that soft, rhythmic light. Each step they took felt heavier, as though they were being drawn deeper into the mystery. They were about to learn that this warship was not just a forgotten relic, it was a warning. A warning that had been left for a reason. Humans built. This ship, as the crew ventured deeper into the heart of the warship, the mysterious energy signature grew stronger. The corridors were eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of unseen systems coming to life, as if the ship itself was waking up from a long slumber. Each step echoed in the hollow metal hallways, amplifying the unease that had settled over the team. Commander Hughes led the way, her eyes scanning every surface, looking for any sign of what might lie ahead. They had discovered something truly extraordinary. The ship wasn't alien, not in the way they had expected. The architecture, the technology, the design, all of it was undeniably human. But how? Why would humans build a ship of this magnitude and send it so far into space, only to abandon it in the depths of the galaxy? "Captain, take a look at this," Lieutenant Reyes called out, his voice tinged with disbelief. Hughes turned to find Reyes, standing before a large metallic panel embedded in the wall. On the panel was an insignia, a symbol that, for a moment, seemed almost familiar. It was a logo, a human one, etched into the metal with startling precision. This is from an old Earth corporation," Hughes said, her voice barely a whisper. "The symbol is from a project that was scrapped decades ago. I thought it was just a conspiracy theory." "What project?" Reyes asked, stepping closer. His curiosity piqued. "It was called Project Titan," Hughes replied, her mind racing as memories flooded back. "It was a government initiative to explore deep space and develop advanced weaponry. Something to rival any alien threat. The project was shut down when funding was pulled, and it was thought to have been lost to history." The insignia on the panel confirmed it. This warship was human-made. It was not the product of some unknown alien race, but of humanity's own ambition and fear. The ship before them had been built by humans. But the question remained. Why had it been abandoned? Why had it been hidden in the farthest reaches of space? Reyes ran his fingers over the etchings, his mind still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the discovery. But why would they leave it here, alone, for so long? Before Hughes could respond, a low mechanical hum filled the air. The ship seemed to be alive, responding to their presence. The walls trembled slightly, and a soft greenish glow illuminated the hallway. The warship's control panels flickered to life, and for the first time, they could see the data flowing across them. It was like an old computer coming back online, after years of being dormant. The crew gathered around, their eyes fixed on the glowing screens. A message appeared on one of the panels, written in a language that was both alien and human. It's English," said Lieutenant Harris, one of the engineers, his voice tense. "But it's not the kind of English we use now." Hughes leaned in, studying the message. It was a log entry, but the words didn't seem quite right. There was an urgency to them, a fear. She began to read aloud. "The Titan project has reached a turning point. The warship is ready, but so is the enemy. We must launch. The weapon must be deployed to prevent the inevitable. Earth must be protected at all costs. No one can know." A chill ran through the crew. The message was clear, but it was also terrifying. This wasn't just a ship designed for exploration or defense, it was a weapon. A weapon that had been built for a purpose that no one on Earth had ever known about. The warship had been meant to protect humanity from something that was coming. From what? Reyes asked, the question hanging heavily in the air. "From an enemy," Hughes said, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. "An enemy that we never knew existed." The crew fell into a stunned silence, the weight of their discovery sinking in. The warship was no ordinary vessel. It wasn't just a relic of some long-forgotten project. It was a weapon, designed for humanity's survival. But if it had been abandoned, what had happened? Why was it left to drift in deep space, forgotten and untouched? The crew looked at each other, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and curiosity. There were still so many unanswered questions, and the deeper they went into the warship, the more they realized that what they had stumbled upon was only the beginning of a story that could change everything. Hughes took a deep breath. "We need to get to the core of this ship. It's the only way we'll understand what happened. We need answers." As the crew moved forward, they could feel the ship's presence growing stronger. It wasn't just a ship, it was a warning, a message from the past, left behind for reasons no one could yet comprehend. But the more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Whatever had caused the Titan project to be abandoned, it was still out there. and it was coming for Earth. The secret hidden in the ship's core. The deeper the crew of the Odyssey ventured into the warship, the more they began to realize that the ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a puzzle, its walls and corridors filled with clues to a mystery that spanned generations. The eerie hum that had filled the air when they first boarded the ship grew louder as they moved forward, as if the ship itself was breathing, reacting to their every move. Commander Hughes led, the way her mind focused on one thing, the core, the heart of the warship where its power and its secrets were hidden. The crew had uncovered that the ship was far from ordinary. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a time capsule, one that held the key to humanity's survival in a future that had yet to unfold. As they approached the central chamber, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The air felt heavier, as if it had been trapped for centuries waiting to be disturbed. "Captain, we're almost there," Reyes said, his voice tense. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Whatever they were about to discover, it was bigger than anything they had imagined. The central chamber doors stood before them, massive and imposing. They were covered in the same alien-like symbols they had seen earlier, but this time they appeared to be pulsating, as if alive. The ship had been waiting for them to reach this point. Hughes signaled for the doors to be opened. The moment they did, a blinding light filled the room. The crew shielded their eyes, but the light soon dimmed to a soft greenish glow. As their eyes adjusted, they saw what lay before them. The core of the ship. It was massive. A swirling, massive energy suspended in the center of the room. Its surface was both liquid and solid, constantly shifting, as if it were alive. It hummed with power, and its sheer presence felt like it was pulling them in. The room was filled with a strange energy, unlike anything the crew had encountered before. It was both beautiful and terrifying, like a cosmic force beyond human understanding. "What is this?" Lieutenant Harris whispered, his voice filled with awe. He stepped forward, his hand hovering near the core as if afraid to touch it. "It's the heart of the ship," Hughes said, her voice steady despite the overwhelming power in the room. "But it's not just a power source. This is something different. Something far beyond what we're capable of understanding." As the crew approached the core, a soft voice echoed through the room. It wasn't coming from the ship's speakers, it was coming from the core itself. "Earth, you have found me," the voice said, its tone calm but filled with ancient wisdom. "I am Titan. I am the weapon you built, but I am also your salvation." The crew froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. The voice seemed to resonate within their very bones. This wasn't just an AI. It was something more, something that had been waiting for them to discover it. Who are you?" Hughes asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I was created by your ancestors, those who feared the coming darkness," the voice continued. "I was built to protect you, to ensure that humanity would survive the great war that was destined to come. But that war is not yet over. And I have been waiting for you to awaken me." The words sent a chill down the crew's spine. The warship was not merely a relic. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, and its purpose was far more sinister than they had ever imagined. It had been built not just to defend, but to fight an enemy so dangerous that it had been hidden away, buried in the deepest recesses of space. "The war," Hughes whispered, her mind racing. "What war? And who are we fighting?" "The enemy is ancient," Titan explained, its voice carrying a sense of deep sorrow. "It is an alien force that has been watching Earth for centuries. It has waited for you to become strong enough to fight back. But that time is near. You will need my power to defeat them. Without it, humanity will fall." The crew stood in stunned silence, the weight of Titan's words sinking in. The warship had not been abandoned, it had been left for a purpose that now, far in the future, was coming to fruition. The enemy was real, and they were coming. But there was something else, something more hidden in the core. Titan's voice softened, There is more. There is a weapon within me, one that can annihilate entire fleets. But it comes with a price. Use it wisely, for once unleashed, it cannot be contained. The room fell silent once more as the crew processed the enormity of the situation. The core was not just a power source. It was a weapon of mass destruction, one that had been built for a war that had never been fought. Until now. Hughes exchanged a glance with Reyes. They had come to this ship seeking answers, but now they faced a decision that could change the fate of humanity. Would they use Titan's power to protect Earth, or would they be consumed by it? The weight of that decision hung heavy in the air, as the ship's hum grew louder, almost as if the warship itself was waiting for them to make their move. The crew knew one thing for sure. They were no longer just explorers. They were the last line of defense against an enemy they hadn't even seen yet. The warship's purpose. The eerie hum of Titan's core continued to vibrate through the air, resonating in every part of the ship as if it were alive, pulsating with anticipation. The crew stood in the dimly lit chamber, the truth of their discovery, settling like a heavy weight on their shoulders. This was no longer just an exploration mission. It was a countdown to something much darker, much more urgent. Commander Hughes glanced at her crew. They had learned that the warship was built for one purpose: to protect humanity from a threat that had been lurking in the shadows for centuries. But even now, as they stood in its heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something that Titan wasn't telling them. "We need to know everything," Hughes said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "Titan, tell us more about the enemy. What are we facing?" The core's energy shifted slightly, and Titan's voice echoed in the chamber again. This time it sounded almost reluctant. "The enemy you will face is not one species but a collective, a race that transcends individual forms. They are an ancient, interdimensional force bound by a single goal: to eradicate the civilizations that rise too high in the stars. You are not the first to be threatened by them. Others have fallen, lost to the void, their civilizations consumed by this enemy's hunger." The crew's blood ran cold as the weight of Titan's words settled over them. They weren't just facing aliens, they were facing something far older, something that operated beyond the physical laws of the universe. This enemy wasn't simply an invader. It was a force of nature, a predator that hunted the advanced races of the galaxy. And now, humanity was its next target. Lieutenant Reyes took a step forward, trying to grasp the full scope of the situation. But why was this ship abandoned? Why didn't humanity use it when they knew this enemy was coming? Titan's voice softened, almost as if it were burdened by the memories. "The warship was built at a time when humanity was divided, when fear clouded reason. The leaders who created me understood the threat, but they also feared the consequences of unleashing such power. There were those who saw the potential for destruction, not just against the enemy, but within their own kind. So, they locked me away, sealed me in the depths of space, waiting for the day when humanity would be ready to understand the true cost of the war." Hughes clenched her fists. "So, we were abandoned, left to fend for ourselves, unprepared until now?" Titan's response was silent for a long moment before the voice spoke again. "Yes, but the time has come. You are humanity's last hope. The enemy is already near. They are in your solar system, gathering their forces. Their invasion is imminent. I was built to destroy them, but I can only do so with your command." The crew stood motionless, the realization settling like ice in their veins. The enemy was already here. They were out there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And they were stronger than anything humanity had faced before. The weight of their survival now rested on the shoulders of these few brave souls aboard the Odyssey. "How do we stop them?" Hughes asked, her voice breaking the heavy silence that had filled the chamber. "What do we need to do?" Titan's voice seemed to grow even more distant, as if the warship's power was reaching further into the unknown. "I can guide you, but the power to defeat them lies within me. There is a weapon hidden in the core, one that can obliterate their fleet. It is the final defense of your people. But be warned, once you activate it, there will be no turning back. The weapon is destructive, and its power will consume everything in its path, including the ship itself. You must decide if humanity is worth that cost. The room grew silent once again. The crew's eyes met each other, the tension palpable. They had come here looking for answers, but what they had found was something far more terrifying. A weapon that could destroy not only the enemy but their own world as well. Lieutenant Reyes, always the pragmatic one, stepped forward. So, we're looking at a choice. Use the weapon and risk destroying everything, or do nothing and let Earth be destroyed. By this alien force? Titan's response was grim. Yes, you must choose. Commander Hughes breathed in deeply, her mind racing through every possibility. Every scenario led to one horrifying conclusion. There was no easy way out. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity, and in doing so they would risk everything. Is there no other way? Hughes asked, her voice laced with a quiet desperation. Titan was silent for a moment before speaking softly. The enemy is relentless. They will not stop until they have consumed your world. You must act, or they will. Claim Earth as their own. The warship has been waiting for you to awaken it to make this choice. Now the power is in your hands. The crew stood at the precipice of a decision that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. The warship's purpose had been clear from the start, to protect humanity. But now, that protection came at a cost, a price too steep for anyone to fully comprehend. As the hum of the core grew louder, filling the room with a sense of urgency, Hughes finally spoke. "Prepare the weapon," she said, her voice resolute. "We'll face this enemy head-on, whatever it takes." The crew knew there would be no turning back, but there was no other choice. The battle for humanity's survival had begun. The final countdown d'Iyad. Warship's power core thrummed with a deep vibrating hum, its energy pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient sleeping giant. Commander Hughes stood before the central chamber, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. To unleash the weapon that Titan had warned them about was to risk everything, to gamble with the future of humanity, the lives of her crew and the survival of Earth itself. Yet there was no other choice. They had no time. The enemy was already approaching, their fleet drawing near. It was a race against time, and the odds were not in their favor. "We're running out of time," Reyes said, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. He stood by the control panel, monitoring the external sensors. "The enemy is closing in, they're almost in our orbit." Hughes' gaze never wavered from the core, the swirling mass of energy that now represented humanity's last hope. But what would be left of humanity after they used the weapon? Would the destruction they unleashed be worth the cost? The question lingered in her mind like a dark cloud, but she pushed it aside. There was no time for doubt. "Activate the weapon," Hughes commanded, her voice steady despite the storm of uncertainty inside her. Lieutenant Harris, one of the engineers who had worked tirelessly to understand the warship's technology, looked over at her with wide eyes. "Are you sure, Captain, this weapon—" "I'm sure," Hughes interrupted, her voice firm. "We don't have another option. The enemy is already here." The crew scrambled into action. The ship's systems came alive, responding to their commands. The warship, once a dormant, silent vessel, now surged with power, its core glowing brighter. As the weapon systems began to activate, the walls of the chamber flickered with data, ancient runes flashing on the walls, as if the ship itself was aware of the weight of the moment. Titan's voice echoed through the chamber again, its tone distant yet authoritative. "You have chosen. The weapon will be activated. Prepare yourselves for the consequences." Hughes swallowed hard. The consequences. It wasn't just the enemy they were facing now. It was the weapon itself. The very thing they had come to use for salvation could just as easily become their doom. "The weapon is primed," Reyes said, his voice tight with apprehension. "We have full power to fire." But before Hughes could respond, the ship's sensors flared. and an alert flashed across the control panel. An enemy ship. A massive one. It had broken through their perimeter defenses and was now within striking range. "They're here," Harris said, his face pale. "The enemy ship is closing in on us. They're preparing to attack." The final countdown had begun. Hughes's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at her crew one last time. There was no turning back. They had already crossed the point of no return. With a deep breath, she gave the order. "Launch the weapon." The ship's core exploded with light, blinding the crew for a moment. Energy surged through the ship, rippling across its entire structure. The walls shook. The air crackled with raw power. And for a moment the Odyssey felt as if it were at the very edge of the universe, teetering on the brink of annihilation. The weapon was a wave. A shock wave of pure, concentrated energy that erupted from the warship's core and shot out into the darkness of space. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The sheer force of it tore through the void, lighting up the darkness with blinding intensity. The enemy ship, now directly in the path of the weapon, had no time to react. The wave of energy collided with the ship with a deafening roar, sending shock waves that rippled through the fabric of space itself. For a moment, the crew thought it was over. The enemy ship had been obliterated. There was no trace left, just a massive expanding cloud of debris. But then, as the dust settled, something unexpected happened. Another ship appeared. A second enemy vessel, larger and more terrifying than the first, emerged from the blackness. It was massive, its surface covered in jagged, almost organic-looking armor. It was unlike anything the crew had seen before. It was not just a ship. It was a war machine, a living, breathing entity that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The crew stared in disbelief. The weapon had worked, but it hadn't been enough. "They're not stopping," Reyes said, his voice full of fear. "They're coming for us." Titan's voice boomed in the chamber once again, as if the ship itself were speaking directly to them. "The enemy is relentless. They will keep coming, but the weapon can be fired again, stronger this time." "Again?" Hughes said, her voice trembling. "How much more power do we have?" "Enough," Titan replied coldly. "You must decide. Fire again and risk everything, or do nothing and watch Earth fall." The final decision was upon them. The countdown was not just for the weapon, it was for the survival of Earth. The weapon could be fired again with even greater power, but each shot brought them closer to the edge. It was a choice between saving humanity and risking their own existence. The enemy was closing in fast. The crew could feel the weight of the moment, the responsibility of their actions hanging over them. The final countdown, the warship's power core thrummed with a deep, vibrating hum, its energy pulsing like the heartbeat of some ancient, sleeping giant. Commander Hughes stood before the central chamber, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. To unleash the weapon that Titan had warned them about was to risk everything, to gamble with the future of humanity, the lives of her crew, and the survival of Earth itself. Yet there was no other choice. They had no time. The enemy was already approaching, their fleet drawing near. It was a race against time, and the odds were not in their favor. "We're running out of time," Reyes said, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. He stood by the control panel, monitoring the external sensors. "The enemy is closing in. They're almost in our orbit." Hughes's gaze never wavered from the core, the swirling mass of energy that now represented humanity's last hope. But what would be left of humanity after they used the weapon? Would the destruction they unleashed be worth the cost? The question lingered in her mind like a dark cloud, but she pushed it aside. There was no time for doubt. "Activate the weapon," Hughes commanded, her voice steady despite the storm of uncertainty inside her. Lieutenant Harris, one of the engineers who had worked tirelessly to understand the warship's technology, looked over at her with wide eyes. "Are you sure, Captain? This weapon—" "I'm sure," Hughes interrupted, her voice firm. "We don't have another option. The enemy is already here." The crew scrambled into action. The ship's systems came alive, responding to their commands. The warship, once a dormant, silent vessel, now surged with power, its core glowing brighter. as the weapon systems began to activate. The walls of the chamber flickered with data, ancient runes flashing on the walls, as if the ship itself was aware of the weight of the moment. Titan's voice echoed through the chamber again, its tone, distant yet authoritative. You have chosen. The weapon will be activated. Prepare yourselves for the consequences. Hughes swallowed hard. The consequences. It wasn't just the enemy they were facing now, it was the weapon itself. The very thing they had come to use for salvation could just as easily become their doom. The weapon is primed, Reyes said, his voice tight with apprehension. We have full power to fire. But before Hughes could respond, the ship's sensors flared, and an alert flashed across the control panel. An enemy ship, a massive one. It had broken through their perimeter defenses and was now within striking range. They're here, Harris said, his face pale. The enemy ship is closing in on us. They're preparing to attack. The final countdown had begun. Hughes's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at her crew one last time. There was no turning back. They had already crossed the point of no return. With a deep breath, she gave the order. Launch the weapon. Ship's core exploded with light, blinding the crew for a moment. Energy surged through the ship, rippling across its entire structure. The walls shook, the air crackled with raw power, and for a moment, the Odyssey felt as if it were at the very edge of the universe, teetering on the brink of annihilation. The weapon was a wave. A shockwave of pure, concentrated energy that erupted from the warship's core and shot out into the darkness of space. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The sheer force of it tore through the void, lighting up the darkness with blinding intensity. The enemy ship, now directly in the path of the weapon, had no time to react. The wave of energy collided with the ship with a deafening roar, sending shockwaves that rippled through the fabric of space itself. For a moment, the crew thought it was over. The enemy ship had been obliterated. There was no trace left, just a massive, expanding cloud of debris. But then, as the dust settled, something unexpected happened. Another ship appeared. A second enemy vessel, larger and more terrifying than the first, emerged from the blackness. It was massive, its surface covered in jagged, almost organic-looking armor. It was unlike anything the crew had seen before. It was not just a ship, it was a war machine, a living, breathing entity that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The crew stared in disbelief. The weapon had worked, but it hadn't been enough. They're not stopping, Reyes said, his voice full of fear. They're coming for us. Titan's voice boomed in the chamber once again, as if the ship itself were speaking directly to them. The enemy is relentless. They will keep coming. But the weapon can be fired again. Stronger this time. Again? Hughes said, her voice trembling. How much more power do we have? Enough, Titan replied coldly. You must decide. Fire again, and risk everything, or do nothing and watch Earth fall. The final decision was upon them. The countdown was not just for the weapon. It was for the survival of Earth. The weapon could be fired again, with even greater power. But each shot brought them closer to the edge. It was a choice between saving humanity and risking their own existence. The enemy was closing in fast. The crew could feel the weight of the moment, the responsibility of their actions hanging over them. With one final glance at her crew, Hughes made the only choice she could. Prepare the weapon, she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. We fire again. This time, they would not just fight to survive. They would fight to end the war, once and for all. The ultimate decision. The air inside the warship's command center was thick with tension. The crew gathered around the control panel could feel the pulse of the ship's power flowing through them. The weapon had already been fired once, with devastating effect, but now they faced a terrifying reality. The enemy was not only still, alive. They were more determined than ever. The second enemy vessel was closing in fast, its size and destructive potential overwhelming. It was a monstrous war machine, almost alive with its pulsating energy shields and weapons bristling from every surface. The crew watched in silence as it approached, their hearts pounding in their chests. The Odyssey was no match for it. The warship's systems were strained, and its crew was exhausted, pushed to the brink of their limits. "We don't have much time," Lieutenant Reyes said, his voice tight with fear. "They're almost on top of us." Hughes stood at the front, her gaze fixed on the massive enemy ship on the screen. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. This was the moment that would define humanity's fate. Titan had warned them. The weapon could be fired again, but it came with a price that might very well end their own existence. "Is there another way?" Hughes whispered to herself, as though asking the warship itself for an answer. The question had been burning in her mind ever since they first activated the weapon. Could they defeat the enemy without risking the destruction of their own world? Could they somehow stop the war without sacrificing everything they had? The answer came from Titan, its voice steady but tinged with something like sadness. "There is no other way. You have chosen the path of defense. The enemy will not stop until they have consumed your world. The weapon is your only chance, but it will destroy everything in its path, including the ship that houses it." The crew looked at one another, their faces etched with fear, uncertainty, and sorrow. It was as though they were caught between two impossible choices: use the weapon to destroy the enemy and risk their own destruction, or let the enemy destroy Earth. Commander Hughes closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was the moment. The time for hesitation had passed. The future of humanity was in her hands. She turned to her crew, her eyes fierce with resolve. "We've come too far to turn back now," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We fire the weapon again. This time we end it. For Earth, for everyone." Reyes nodded grimly, his fingers hovering over the control panel. He could feel the power surging through the ship, a raw, almost unbearable energy. They were moments away from unleashing the final wave of destruction. "Are we sure?" Harris asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Once we do this, there's no going back. The ship will be destroyed. All of us will be destroyed. Can we really do this?" Hughes glanced at her crew one last time. The faces of her team reflected in the glass of the control panel. They had all signed up for this mission, never knowing the horrors they would face. But now they were on the edge of something far more terrifying than any of them could have imagined. "We have no choice," Hughes replied, her voice quiet but filled with unshakable determination. "We fight or we die, but at least we die trying to save Earth." Reyes pressed the button. The ship's core erupted once again with brilliant light, brighter and more powerful than before. The pulse of energy shot out with a deafening roar, tearing through the space between the warship and the enemy vessel. The shockwave blasted through the void of space, radiating outward with terrifying speed. For a moment, everything was silent. Then came the explosion. The enemy ship disintegrated, its massive form shredded into 1,000 pieces by the sheer force of the weapon's power. The explosion was so intense that it seemed to shake the very fabric of the universe. A massive cloud of debris expanded in all directions, consuming the remnants of the enemy vessel. But as the crew watched, something strange happened. A second explosion followed, even bigger than the first. A ripple of energy moved through space, a shockwave of force that rocked the Odyssey to its core. The warship's lights flickered as the power drained, and the ship groaned under the strain.